Hi, I'm Phil McCauley from Labour Business Television, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Darren Jones MP, Member of Parliament for Bristol North West, and the brand new elected Chairman of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee. Darren, congratulations on your recent appointment. How does that feel, and what's next for you with the committee?
Well, look, thank you for your congratulations and for having me on Labour Business TV today. It's great to be with you and to be talking to your members. I was obviously thrilled to be elected chair of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee because it's a great role in Parliament with a huge policy brief across business, workers, energy, climate change and industrial strategy to be able to get your teeth stuck into. And the great thing with select committees is that you have a capacity and resource to be able to bring people together to try to put forward really substantive thought leadership to the government and to others about driving the policy agenda. So I'm looking very much forward to doing that over the coming years.
Of course, you've joined this key role at this moment in history, coronavirus, the pandemic, the transition out of that back into some form of economic recovery, possible recession, on top of which we face the end of our participation in any reasonable arrangements with the European Union. I mean, it's a tumultuous time. How are you going to approach that?
Well, it's tumultuous, but it's also extremely exciting because we have the opportunity now to create a type of country and economy that we want for the future. Evidently, sadly, we are in opposition, so we've got to persuade the government of that. But between our excellent front bench team and those of us on our select committees, I'm confident that we're going to be able to put forward really strong arguments for how we rebuild the economy and recover from the pandemic. We know that the government is going to have to borrow to invest. We know that we want to bake in a net zero sustainable transition. We know the government is keen on levelling up and what that means for towns and rural communities as well as cities. And so there's lots of opportunities here to be able to influence the debate and put forward the ideas that are fit for the future for our country. And that is a big task, and we've got to get it right, but I think it's also very exciting. And if the Conservative Party fails on this agenda, then of course the Labour Party is going to hold them to account, and that's going to be the big debate of the next general election.
It's a key issue, of course. And turning to the question of the ending of lockdown and the gradual opening up of business, what's your sense of that stage, the stage we're at now, where we go next, and what's going to be important for business leaders as they think about how to re-engage with the economy?
So there's three main stages to this. There's the how do you respond in the middle of the national emergency, which of course we're currently living through. There's the how do you then transition from that into the third stage, which is the recovery. And on the transition, I don't have any particular confidence in the government's strategy on this, if I'm honest. The Prime Minister has not been able to answer my questions, and nor have some of his ministers, about how they plan to taper furlough, for example, or support different sectors most at risk, so that we're able to hold on to the skills and business and capacity that we're going to need for the recovery. And then, of course, you start talking about the recovery and how you're going to spend money and put forward policies and collaborate across the entire economy to get this right for the country. The government at the moment hasn't given us any suggestion about its appetite or the scope of its planned interventions, or indeed what this new relationship is going to be about partnership between the state, business unions and other groups. And so we've got to help shape that.
It looks as though the government's mind is set firm on a very hard Brexit with almost nothing in place, apart from perhaps the fig leaf arrangement that Johnson gets with Trump before the American elections in November, if Liz Truss is successful with her negotiations on international free trade agreement. What's your sense of that position for British manufacturers and business in the UK?
So I find it deeply troubling. I mean, declare my interest as a loud Remainer whilst that was still relevant. Of course, we have to live in the political reality that we find ourselves in. So Brexit is happening. The government's current view, as you rightly highlighted, is that we will just leave the European Union at the end of the calendar year, irrespective of whether we have been able to negotiate a free trade agreement. And that's going to be deeply damaging, in my view. We know that the bulk of our exports, which are significantly reliant on services, but even the bulk of our goods-based exports are to partners in the European Union. And we know that many of our strongest sectors in the UK, whether it's aerospace or automotive or gas turbines or pharmaceuticals, rely on European supply chains. And so it looks like we're going to end up in a position where we don't have an FTA in place, and that's going to cause us economic damage for ideological purposes. And by the way, assuming that a FTA with the United States is going to help. It's not, both because of the degree of trade that we do with the United States. The European Union is still our #1 trading destination and partner, but also because under President Trump, it's very clear that he takes an America first position and is willing to use trade tariffs and other things, even against allies, when he thinks it's in the national interest. That's not very conducive to global free trade. And so I don't have a huge amount of hope about that replicating what we'll be losing from our membership of the European Union.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable view. Now, tell me this, what's it like in your own constituency for businesses coming out of the COVID situation and looking to re-engage? I mean, you had a good go at the Prime Minister on the liaison committee about the absence of any proper arrangements for people who are running their own businesses or self-employed. How does that work in your own constituency?
So I've kind of got every aspect of the debate at a constituency level as well as the national level, which is, every MP will say this, but it's why I have a particularly interesting constituency. So for me, I've got a lot of kind of the big sectoral questions at play. We've got a significant site with Airbus, GKN, Rolls-Royce, Boeing, the big aerospace part of our goods manufacturing economy, but also the very, very significant supply chain that feeds into those big beasts at the top. And so, I'm very conscious and concerned about how the government takes a sectoral approach to helping businesses that might be hurt for longer from the pandemic. But then equally, we have very many SMEs in Bristol North West and across Bristol. We have a vibrant digital economy, but also, this is Rachel's language, but I like to pinch it, the everyday economy. Many of the communities in my constituency rely on their vibrancy from the high street or the charitable and third sector organizations that keep the wheels moving at a community level. And those businesses and SMEs and high streets can't take on coronavirus loans and become indebted. There's no further grants coming forward, and we don't know what the support's going to be for staff. And so it is a concern about how we start to reopen the economy in a way that allows for social distancing and to give consumers confidence to return to the high street too. And again, on this issue, I don't think the government has been putting in anywhere enough guidance or support to make that happen.
So thinking about the future now, as we go into the summer and the autumn and towards the end of this year, what are your reflections on how this government is currently performing?
I think the government isn't performing well. I think the public get that because the confidence in government has been falling. The Prime Minister's approval ratings have been falling. And I think it's because they don't have a clear, coherent strategy that they're able to communicate very clearly about how they're going to lift the lockdown restrictions and transition us into a recovery. Now, the Prime Minister, when I asked him about the recovery package, he promised to bring that to us before the summer, but then quickly U-turned on that commitment and said he wasn't actually promising it before the summer. But we're going to have to start seeing these strategies from government as soon as possible, because until we do, consumers and businesses and workers aren't going to be having the confidence to get back to as much of normal as possible whilst we wait for the vaccination to come down the pipeline.
And when you think finally about business and young people who have perhaps completed their education and they're coming to the workforce for the first time, having left university or college or their apprenticeships, what's your message of hope for them?
Well, the message of hope is that we know in the Labour Party that government intervention on these types of unemployment issues works, whether it was in 1997 or just after the financial crash in 2008 and running into the coalition years, that government job protection for young people especially, but also long-term unemployed, where we work with businesses and other organizations to get you meaningful workplace opportunities that links with skills and learning development to try to create opportunities for you for the future, works. It's actually of cost benefit to the government to do that instead of having people at home unemployed on universal credit. And so the evidence speaks for itself. Now we're probably going to have to make the case for that, and we're going to need to work with businesses and unions and others to make sure that it delivers across the country. But there is hope there because we know it works, and we've just got to fight for that as strongly and as consistently as we can.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's always struck me as being odd that you can have an unsecured loan of £50,000 to get an education, but you can't easily get a loan to start your business once you're qualified. It does seem ludicrous, and perhaps we'll move more to a sort of small business administration type arrangement in the UK, perhaps under a future Labour government where business loans can be fully guaranteed and give entrepreneurs an opportunity. What is your sense of the practical realities that are going forward for business? Because Labour's going to have to campaign very vigorously and hold the government to account here. How can your committee in particular help to do that?
So my committee is a function of the House, and so it's cross-party. It has a majority of Conservative members on it. But all of our members are very pragmatic, and they all know that select committees can't be party political. So it's driven based on the evidence that comes to us. Now, the fact is that the Labour Party under Keir Starmer isn't trying to score populist political points in order to win poll ratings. It's putting forward a very pragmatic, practical, collaborative approach to dealing with the pandemic and looking towards the recovery and the opportunity to create a fairer, better Britain in the future. And so that's the function that we also play on committees. And if the evidence shows that the government's actions are not working, that the government is not providing confidence to the market and to workers and others, then we will say that, and we will present the evidence. And so between us, we will be able to serve that purpose in holding the government to account. And that's our job. We've got to keep them on their toes, and they've got to get this right for the country, and we'll collaborate as best as possible to make sure that's the case.
So we can look forward to grown-up government under Labour challenging this government. And what's your final thought in relation to the economic prospects just in the next, between now and the next budget? What should the Chancellor be thinking about doing to help business at this point?
Well, look, this is not an easy task, and it's not. None of us have got all the answers because we don't yet know what the economy and the future economy is going to look like in this country, let alone around the rest of the world. And you know, I have concerns that we're still recording high death rates, that we're not getting through the pandemic quick enough, and that's going to make it harder for us to recover as quickly as some of our competitors or competitor countries in other parts of the world. So it's very difficult to know for sure what we should be prescribing. But the key thing, I think, is that we've reimagined and relearned the role that the state has to play in a capitalist market-based economy, where the market can't just solve all of these things in the right way and requires partnership with the state. And we're going to want to see that from Rishi Sunak in the next budget, with a clear fiscal plan to support workers, the economy, to invest in infrastructure and productivity that levels up the country and that bakes in the net zero sustainable transition. And we look forward to looking at the detail of that and holding the government to account over its commitments.
Well, Darren Jones MP, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.